it's possible to control someone's attention. More than that, to predict human behavior. Let's put this idea to a test. Imagine I hand everyone here a sheet of paper and ask you to draw or paint a basic landscape. What does it look like? I assume it's on these lines. A house, some mountains and trees, clouds, a river, and perhaps even a flock of birds shaped like a V. Now, I don't say that we lack imagination, but somewhere along the way, we adapted to an idea of what a normal drawing looks like. This idea stayed with me because it made me realize that we don't experience the world neutrally. We interpret it through habits that we've absorbed, patterns we've learned, and expectations we've inherited, often without having consciously chosen them. And once I noticed this, everything shifted slightly. I started noticing the small frictions I used to ignore. I started noticing and questioning things I once accepted automatically. I started recognizing patterns, not just in design, but in behavior, in conversations, in classrooms, and in systems. That's when I noticed this was not just an abstract idea. This was something shaping my daily life. My name is Sanaya Sethia, and today I want to talk about something that's quietly moved how I move through the world, how I think, how I create, and how I question things. I call it the art of noticing. In psychology, there's a concept called schemas, mental frameworks used to organize information. They're useful, necessary even. They help us recognize patterns, make quick decisions, and navigate the world without feeling overwhelmed. But they can also shape what we overlook. They can influence what feels normal. They can influence what we stop questioning. And so, to me, creativity is no longer about producing something impressive. It's about interrupting those defaults. It's about seeing what others have learned to ignore. Once I learned about schemas in school, I started to notice them everywhere. Not just in theory, but in my own life. It started with something surprisingly ordinary: pockets. As young girls, my sister and I used to carry around tiny toys and trinkets. Often, we would try sneaking them into bags. Didn't matter what bag it was, whether it was my mom's purse or my school bag. Why, you might ask? Well, it seemed as though the pockets in our pants never fit anything properly. Not our toys, not the trinkets, and now, not even our phones. So, we had to learn early on that if we wanted to carry something around, we needed a bag. Always. Years later, not much has changed. Even now, I genuinely celebrate when I find clothes with pockets that actually work. It's the kind of joy that makes me message my friends, "It has pockets," with the photo attached. And ironically enough, my current choice of clothing today does not have pockets that work. But this does beg the question as to, if something so basic becomes exciting, why do we get used to its absence in the first place? This small observation opened the door for me to notice other things. For example, a while ago, my parents were looking to buy a motorcycle. Now, both of them are very confident riders, but the experience was not the same for both. For one, it was mostly about choice and preference. Hey, it could even be about color and style. But for the other, it became so much more technical. Suddenly, we had to calculate safety, height, balance, and comfort so much more carefully. No one said, "You don't belong here." Nothing dramatic happened. And yet, the experience felt different because of how options were designed. What struck me here was not anger. It was awareness. The realization that many systems don't loudly exclude. They simply assume. And those assumptions can quietly shape who moves through life with ease and who constantly has to adjust. And noticing that is not pessimism. It's the beginning of creative thinking. Because once you see the assumptions, you can imagine the alternatives. And the more I saw it everywhere, whether it was in products, in designs, in services. How often the word universal really just meant designed with one kind of user in mind. And the more I noticed, the more it stopped feeling like an isolated inconvenience, but like a pattern. And so, even the idea of pink tax became quite personal to me in the same way. Not because I read about it on newspaper articles or journals, or even learned about it in videos, but because I started noticing it while standing in stores, comparing prices, realizing that most products I'd grown used to paying more for were not actually that different from their counterparts. What stayed with me here was not frustration. It was the strange feeling of being unheard. And through these experiences, I started thinking someone should really tell the company that made this. But I didn't know how. There was no real space for users like me to come out and say, this is not working for me, in a way that companies could actually listen to. And this is where noticing shifted into something more for me. I started imagining if there could be a space where everyday users didn't have to shout to be heard, just speak honestly. An app that feels calm and intuitive, where users didn't write complaints, they shared experiences. The same way I could tell my friend, this is not working for me. You could tag the issue, whether it's design, comfort, accessibility, pricing. And as more people shared, patterns would begin to form. Real time data and insights, visible on the interface itself for both companies and users to view, to realize where shortcomings and opportunities lie. Now, honestly speaking, this is not something I'm building, and nor is it a business venture I plan to explore. This is an idea that came to me on a random day where I noticed too much, cared too deeply, and was unable to unsee the gap between users and the people designing for them. Because I knew what it felt like to quietly adapt and adjust instead of being heard. Now, noticing didn't stop at objects for me, it extended into people. I started noticing how some voices in classrooms filled the spaces effortlessly, while others hesitated even when they had something valuable to say. I started noticing how often we soften ourselves before speaking, how easily we accept expectations most people throw on us, and how frequently we apologize for taking up space. These were not things that someone taught me to look for. They were things I began to understand once I slowed down enough to pay attention. And this is what shaped me into the person I am today and the person I can be tomorrow. Over time, I also realized something very important. Noticing is not separate from creativity. Noticing is where creativity begins. And that understanding came from home long before I had words for it. My dad notices details most people miss: patterns, inconsistencies, subtle shifts. Conversations with him can often leave you and me thinking differently about things we once assumed were simple. My mom, on the other hand, notices possibilities. She experiments constantly. If something is not working, her instinct is never to accept it, it's to rethink it. Growing up with both of them taught me something very important without anyone ever explicitly saying it. You notice first, and then you imagine better. You observe, you question, you try something new, you adjust, and then you notice again. That cycle is creativity. For me, noticing and creativity show up in small, everyday ways. In music, it's realizing when a song actually is moving me versus when I'm just listening. In art, it's knowing when I'm creating to express something rather than just trying to make it look good. In reading, it's knowing whose stories feel familiar and whose perspectives I rarely encounter. And even in conversations, I've begun to notice which spaces make me overthink every word and which ones let me be myself. It took me a long time to realize that creativity is not limited to art. It's present in how we solve problems, how we lead, how we think, how we build, how we teach, and how we communicate. Because a good innovator notices inefficiencies most people miss. A good teacher notices the student who's slowly disengaging. A good leader notices silence, not just applause. We often celebrate big ideas, but we rarely celebrate the attention that led to them. Because the truth is, many solutions exist. More inclusive designs exist. More thoughtful systems exist. What's missing more often is not innovation, it's observation. Because we tend to rush to fix things without fully noticing what actually needs fixing. Noticing takes effort. It requires slowing down. It requires staying uncomfortable with questions instead of settling for easy answers. Noticing has the power to change how we think, how we relate, how we create, how we design, and how we live. That's why, to me, the most powerful skill is not intelligence, it's not confidence, and it's not talent. To me, it's attention. And that is why I call this the art of noticing. Because noticing is where change begins and is where human potential unfolds. Thank you.